okay, but given that we've built these precursor technologies, given that our product has moved from being nascent to having thousands of users, the AIP product, given that we believe that the reception to this is unlike anything we've seen in PGA, Foundry, Apollo, target selection, and given the receptivity of the market, also not to mention that we have been profitable now, we expect to be eligible for the S&P. For several quarters we've been profitable, that we have over $3 billion in the bank. That positions us to fulfill our new aspiration. It allows us to see in the future how we would do that, which is to simply be the most valuable enterprise software company in the world.
On the back of our third consecutive quarter of GAAP profitability, $285 million in adjusted free cash flow in the first half of the year, and over $3.1 billion on our balance sheet, our board of directors has authorized a stock repurchase program of up to $1 billion. This program reflects our conviction in the trajectory of our business and the value we see in our stock.
Welcome back. Today we are going to be discussing Palantir's stock buyback program that was announced last quarter, totaling $1 billion. The point of this video is going to be to determine more certainty around this program, how long it will last, and ultimately when I believe the company will start buying back shares and at what price. So Alex Karp said the company is going to invest in ourselves by launching this program. And here is a general spike in the announcement of new buyback programs at the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022 as the market pulled back, Palantir announcing in the middle of 2023. Now, it's worth noting that generally companies buy back stock when times are good and when they have enough cash to do so. And historically and statistically speaking, companies are not very good at buying back at appropriate prices, right? Because of the business cycle, they're less inclined to buy when the share price is at a relative bottom. So we'll see if Palantir is able to manage this a bit differently, but an example of that would be Meta, for instance, when they were buying shares pretty much at the peak and all the way down. But anyways, back to Palantir. The buyback announcement comes after Palantir is up more than 160% in 2023, but this is not an unusual move for a company like Palantir that's still in its early life in the public markets. So here's a quote saying, "At some point in the game, companies have to shift from investing all of their money in capital expenditures to returning capital through buybacks, which tends to precede dividends." So Palantir is in no way ready to issue dividends, but I do agree that buybacks are the logical next step for a free cash flow machine like Palantir. And it's generally a good point in terms of a feather in Palantir's cap as they become profitable and are able to buy back shares as a result. So the $1 billion buyback program may seem like quite a large number, but it's smaller on a relative basis, representing about 3% of Palantir's market capitalization, and typically buybacks are about 5%. So that's fairly arbitrary in my opinion. I'm not too concerned about what that is, but if you do think about it, $1 billion buyback when they have $3 billion in cash, it is on the smaller side, especially when you consider, I believe this will be spread out all the way through 2025. So almost 2.5 years or so, in my opinion, that this will take place. And we'll talk about where I think they're going to buy back from the stock chart. But I don't think this is a 1-year thing, let alone a 1-quarter buyback. They haven't been very explicit about what the timeline is going to be, and rightly so. But that's just my opinion on this not being a monumental deal one way or the other, but definitely a good sign. So Alex Karp said on the earnings call that the buyback was a signal of the company's belief in themselves, and David Glazer added in a conversation with MarketWatch that the buyback also shows confidence in the company's belief that it has a large opportunity ahead of it in artificial intelligence. So announcing a buyback program is one thing. Next is whether the management indeed ends up repurchasing stock. Not a question for me. They're absolutely going to repurchase stock. It's a matter of when, not if. So this is a volatile stock, which in some ways gives management the opportunity to pick their spots. It's important to see if they're actually going to follow through and retire some shares. Again, I'm not sure where the doubt is coming from. They wouldn't have announced it if they weren't interested at all in buying some of the $1 billion worth of the authorized shares. So it is a good point that Palantir, very high beta, a very volatile name, and we've seen that certainly this year. So it offers some tremendous opportunities to scale in. So let's have a look at the stock chart here. Palantir, again, if we're just recapping, 2 quarters ago, $8, ran up. Our last quarter release above 20, came back down, released earnings, dropped down to the $13, $14 range, and now we're sitting here at $15 today. Personally, if you ask me where they would potentially rebuy some shares, I think $10 would be a good estimate for a minimum on the share price before they start buying back some of those $1 billion worth. But I think largely my expectation would be the $12 to $10 range. We could see an initial tranche of that $1 billion, maybe 20% or so. And then I think they could continue to scale in that $8 range. They would probably go a little heavier with the purchasing, but that's just on a relative basis. And I think over time, right, because I believe this is a more than 1 year program, they'll institute another or increase the buyback program in the future. But I think I'm certainly not expecting the stock to go back to $8, right? So Palantir might, the management at least, might have to wait, see what the stock does, and then ultimately when it continues to move higher, buy a dip then. So they may end up purchasing stock in the $15 range, let's say, if it goes back to 20 and pulls back in a year from now or something like that, or even higher. So my point is, I think it really is a relative game. They want to purchase stock where they feel there is a high likelihood of internal rate of return exceeding their cost of capital. So ultimately, we're not going to know. I think it's going to be a quarterly report type of thing that we will find out on their balance sheet what they have done and when they have purchased. But I think it'd be a good sign if we see strength in the stock. If it drops to 12, potentially that could be them buying some shares. But ultimately, we're not going to know. Hopefully this video was helpful in terms of walking through my thoughts. I don't think it's a 1 year program. I think it's a 2 to 3 year program of the $1 billion. And I don't think they're buying shares yet. I think they will buy shares on a decline in price. And if the price does not decline, I think they will buy the shares eventually on a decline, even if the stock moves higher and pulls back to some level above where it is now. I fully believe they will be purchasing stock. I don't think this is a bluff or some manipulation of the news. I think they intend on purchasing stock, and I also think the buyback will be increased in the future. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Until next time.